There is $41 left in the account. 6 days remain until the next paycheck. Marcus stands in the discount aisle of a grocery store, doing math on a dented can of soup that's 50 cents cheaper than the one beside it, out of a paycheck of $2,400 that landed less than a week ago. If that paycheck doubled tomorrow, would anything actually change? Or would the spending simply grow to match it, and the same 6 days of counting would just happen at a bigger number? Marcus works at a distribution warehouse, stacking pallets from 6 in the morning until his shift ends, and by the time he gets home, his shoulders ache in a way that never fully goes away anymore. The forklifts hum around him all day. He eats lunch alone most days, sitting on an upturned crate near the loading dock, because the diner across the street isn't really in the budget on a work day. He jokes with the guys on his line that they're not really working for money. They're working for rent and food and nothing else. And everybody laughs because it's true, and laughing is easier than sitting with it. There's an older guy on the floor. Reggie, been there 11 years, drives the same rusted-out truck the whole time Marcus has known him. Never once complains about money the way the younger crew does. Marcus used to assume Reggie just never got anywhere in life. It never crossed his mind that quiet might be its own kind of doing fine. Payday changes Marcus completely, and not in a good way. The second that direct deposit hits, his phone starts buzzing. Come out tonight, man. Life's short, and he goes every time, because for a few hours at the bar, buying a round, wearing the newer shoes he picked up that morning, he feels like he's exactly as fine as everyone else looks. One night like that runs him about $95. He never once did the math on what that actually meant until the night everything changed. A week later, like always, the account's back to nothing, and Marcus is counting days again. One evening walking home, he passes a rental house near the edge of his block and hears shouting, a landlord standing at the gate, furious, and a tenant standing beside 2 duffel bags holding everything his family owns. You work every day, the landlord's saying, but you never once had a plan for it. That's the difference. The tenant's wife is crying. His daughter's gripping her mother's sleeve. Marcus doesn't move. Those words weren't for him, but they land like they were. He gets home and can't stop turning it over. Not the size of his paycheck. What happens to it after it lands? He's never once written down where the 95-hour nights actually come from, what they're actually costing him beyond the hangover, and for the first time it occurs to him he genuinely doesn't know. The next morning, instead of sleeping in, he walks 2 blocks to a diner he's never been inside because he can't usually justify the cost, orders coffee, and sits across from Reggie, who's there every Saturday, apparently doing the same thing he's done for 11 years, nursing. 1 cup and reading the same worn financial magazine folded to the same dog-eared page. You've been at this longer than anyone on the floor, Marcus says. How come you never seem stressed about money? Reggie slides the magazine across the table without looking up. It's not the article that matters. It's the small chart printed next to it, showing what happens if you set aside $20 a week and let it sit in something that earns roughly 8% a year, left completely alone. Marcus does the arithmetic slowly, in his head, twice because it doesn't feel like it should be right. $20 a week for 30 years isn't $31,200. Compounding at 8%, it grows to somewhere around $122,000. The interest ends up doing more work than every dollar Marcus ever put in himself. That's not a trick, Reggie says. That's just what happens when you leave money alone long enough instead of spending it the same week it shows up. Reggie taps the table once, like he's about to say the part that actually matters. 11 years ago, I did the same math you're doing right now at this same table with a magazine that looked exactly like this one. I wasn't smart about it. I was just consistent. $20 a week doesn't feel like anything. It's one lunch. It's what you'd spend on a night out without even thinking about it. The only thing that makes it work is that I never once stopped. Not during a slow month, not during a good one. He pauses. Most people quit right around the point where the numbers were about to start doing the heavy lifting for them instead of the other way around. Marcus asks the obvious question. Why didn't anybody explain it like that before? Reggie shrugs. Most people explain money like a lecture. Numbers don't need a lecture. They just need time. When Marcus's next paycheck lands, he doesn't answer the group text. His friends call asking where he is, half joking that he's gone boring on them. He tells them he's not disappearing. He's just done watching his future evaporate in one weekend. That night, he cooks rice and eggs at home. The first meal he's made himself in longer than he can remember, and it costs him about $3, and it's enough. He opens the Notes app on his phone and starts writing down every dollar that leaves his account. Not to feel bad about it, just to actually see it for the first time. Here's the part he starts doing differently, and it's small enough that it barely feels like anything. He stops thinking about purchases in dollars and starts thinking about them in hours. Those $90 nights out weren't $90 anymore. At what he makes an hour, that's close to a full 10-hour shift, stacking pallets, breathing warehouse dust, just to fund a few hours of feeling like everyone else. Once a purchase gets translated into hours of his own body doing the work, it gets a lot harder to spend carelessly. A pair of $80 shoes stops being just $80. It's nearly a full shift start to finish. A $6 coffee on the way to work stops being background noise. It's about 45 minutes of standing on a concrete floor every single day it happens. None of this means Marcus stops buying things entirely. It just means he stops buying things on autopilot, without knowing what they actually cost him in the only currency he actually has, which is his time and his body. If you've ever looked at a receipt and never once translated it into hours of your own life, that's exactly the kind of shift worth sitting with. And it's exactly why this channel exists. So if this is landing, subscribe, because the numbers are about to get even more specific. 6 weeks in, Marcus's bike tire blows out on the way to work, and the same week, a $140 phone repair bill shows up out of nowhere. His small emergency envelope, the one he'd built up to just over $200, gets wiped out completely in 4 days. For a moment, it feels exactly like before, like none of it was ever going to hold up under real life. He sits on the edge of his bed that night with the notebook open, staring at the zeroed-out envelope, feeling every bit of the old pull to just stop bothering with any of it. But he does the math instead of quitting. Losing that $200 doesn't erase the plan. It just pushes the $122,000 number back by roughly 4 months, based on how long it'll take him to rebuild the cushion before he's contributing at full pace again. 4 months. Not forever, not nothing. Just a number he can actually see and plan around instead of a vague feeling of failure. He runs the numbers a second time just to be sure, because it still feels like it should be worse than that. Losing $200 out of a plan aiming for $122,000 over 30 years barely moves the final number at all. Maybe a few $100 difference by the time he's Reggie's age. What actually costs him is time, not the dollar amount itself. And time is the one thing he can make back simply by not quitting. He writes that number down too. Somehow seeing the actual cost of the setback, instead of just feeling defeated by it, makes it easier to keep going. Months pass. Every payday follows the same order now. Rent, groceries, $20 into the account Reggie told him about, and only then whatever's left for anything else. Some months that $20 feels almost embarrassingly small, sitting in an account that isn't growing fast enough to notice. But he remembers what Reggie told him about time doing the actual work, and he leaves it alone. It's not magic, and Marcus never pretends it is, even to himself. Some months the $20 doesn't happen at all, when a bill lands wrong or a shift gets cut. He doesn't beat himself up over those months anymore. He just picks it back up the next payday instead of deciding the whole plan failed because 1 week didn't go perfectly. The plan was never about being perfect every single week. It was about never fully stopping. There's a moment worth naming here too. Marcus starts noticing how much energy he used to spend just making his life look fine online and in front of his friends. Timing outings around what would photograph well, buying things mostly so nobody would guess he was struggling. All of that quietly falls away once he stops performing for people who, it turns out, were mostly too busy managing their own image to study his that closely. A year in, for the first time in his adult life, Marcus reaches the end of a month with money still sitting in the account. It's not a lot. It's not life-changing. But it's there, and it's his, and it didn't disappear the way it always used to. He's not smiling because he's rich. He's smiling because for the first time, his paycheck has a shape to it that he chose, instead of a shape that just happened to him. He texts Reggie a single line, "Still here, still doing it." Reggie sends back 3 words. "Told you so." His friend Deshaun calls around this time, the one who always seemed to have it more figured out. Newer car, nicer apartment, closet full of things that made his life look effortless. Except Deshaun's calling to say the car got repossessed last month, and he's back living with his sister. And could Marcus maybe help him figure out where his own money actually goes? Because nobody ever taught him how to look. Marcus tells him the honest truth. There was no breakthrough moment. Just a napkin calculation on a Saturday morning and doing the boring thing every week after that. Deshaun wants specifics, so Marcus grabs a napkin off the diner counter, the same kind Reggie used on him, and writes it out. Take whatever's leaving your account on nights out and cut it in half, not to zero, just in half. Put that half towards something that grows instead of something that disappears by Monday. Do that every single payday, whether it's $20 or $200, and stop touching it no matter what shows up on your phone. Deshaun stares at the napkin like it's supposed to be more complicated than that. It isn't. It never was. Here's the actual math, laid out plainly, for anyone doing this alongside him. $20 a week for 1 year is $140 saved, plus whatever modest growth that year earns, which isn't dramatic yet. Usually somewhere around $30 to $40 in interest on its own. That's the part that discourages people early, because the first year looks unimpressive next to the effort it takes. It's the same reason so many people quit gym memberships in February or abandon a budget by the second month. They're judging the whole plan by a stretch of time that was never designed to look impressive on its own. But run that same $20 a week for 10 years instead, and it crosses roughly $1,400. Run it for 30, untouched, and it lands near that $122,000 mark Reggie's magazine first showed him. The curve doesn't look like much for a long time. Then it stops looking like nothing at all. Marcus never quits his warehouse job, not for years. He doesn't open a business, doesn't buy property, doesn't become anybody's idea of a success story overnight. What actually changes is smaller and, in its own way, bigger. He stops being afraid to check his own bank account. He stops doing math in a grocery aisle on which can of soup he can afford. He has a number now, growing quietly in the background. That means one bad week doesn't turn into a crisis anymore. Go back to that discount aisle from the beginning. Same store. A year and a half later, Marcus is standing in the same spot, and this time he's not doing frantic math on a dented can. He picks up the soup he actually wants, checks the receipt out of habit rather than fear, and walks out without once counting the days until his next check. He never became the guy with the nicer car. He became the guy who wasn't scared of his own bank account, which turned out to be worth more than the car ever was. Reggie still drives that same rusted-out truck, still nurses one coffee every Saturday at that same diner table. Marcus sits across from him sometimes now, not because he needs the lesson anymore, but because it's become the best part of his week regardless. If this changed how you think about your next paycheck, that's exactly why this channel exists. Subscribe, and we'll keep breaking down the parts of money nobody explains clearly.